Alright, so we're out here. I'm going to do a quick demo on how I rattle for blacktails. And start off with, I've got a set of blacktail sheds, and you'll notice I've got them all bungeed together. And I do this so that they don't clank around. I usually have them strapped to the back of my pack, and I don't want these clunking around while I'm walking or hiking through the woods. So first thing I'm going to do here is just show you kind of how I go about this. You'll notice I have two lefts. Sometimes I use a left and a right, two right, doesn't really matter, but I do like using the same side for the simple reason that I can nest them together, bungee them tight, and they don't clunk around as much. If you've got a left and a right, you end up with this funny situation where it's just harder to keep them quiet and keep them kind of compact. So feel free to use same side, it doesn't really matter. I like to use antlers that have at least 2 or 3, 4 points. I also like to pick some antlers that's got some texture on the bases, because I'll use that and grind those together, which makes a realistic sound as if two bucks have their foreheads together and they're really pushing and shoving. So we'll get into that in a minute, but I just want to set the stage. I usually have a cord here so that if I'm tree stand hunting, I can hang these in a tree. I also like to leave it long enough where that they're not hanging side by side, because if they clunk in a tree, that's really loud. I like to hang one higher on the hook and let the other one sit lower. The other thing you can do, and I'll probably make a video on this, is if you're in a tree stand, it's just fine to rattle out of a tree stand. But you got to remember that that sound now is up 18 feet in the air, 20 feet in the air, and that's good for getting the sound out there. But if you're trying to sound realistic to a buck that might be in closer, you want that sound down on the ground. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll just tie an overhand loop in my cord, and I will hook this on my bow pull-up rope, and I'll jig this off the bottom, off the ground, and I'll let these antlers thump the ground. I will let them clank, hit the leaves, swing them into the ferns, make a bunch of commotion like that. And by doing that, you're keeping that sound down low, which is more natural, especially for deer that might be in close. So that's just another tip. So give yourself plenty of room on your cord so that you can have that versatility. So next what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I would typically rattle and set up to rattle a late season, or I should say late October, blacktail. Now I'm going to vary my rattling sequences from, say, tomorrow, which is opening day, October 17th. I'm going to be a little different on the antlers tomorrow than I might be the last week of the season, and I'll go over that. Alright, so here, let's go ahead and get started. We'll set up and I'll show you how I go about it. Alright, so here's the typical setup that I look for. Number one, I like to have some kind of structure to help break up my outline and even my movement, and have a place to lean my bow. So in this case, there's this big maple right here. What I'm going to do is kind of clear out a spot underneath here, but I'm going to leave a lot of these dry sticks and vegetation, because I'm going to utilize those during my rattling sequence. And what I'm trying to set up here is, the ideal situation would be, I've got the wind coming this way. Maybe it's a thicket over here, a thick bedding area, a big timber edge. It could be any kind of structure that could separate bedding area from transition area, or bedding area, feeding area. Essentially what I like to do is get in really tight on bedding areas, but I got to do that very carefully. So I might be 100, 200 yards off a bedding area, and then set up once, and then I might encroach a little closer, say in an hour, just to kind of ease into that spot. I don't want to get caught moving. So it's really imperative that when you set up to rattle, you give it enough time. I cannot tell you how many bucks I've blown by simply standing up thinking nothing heard me and nothing's coming in. So in this scenario, again, this is fictional, this would be a big thicket off this direction, and then I've got some nice shooting lanes here and back in behind me over here. And again, I've got the wind coming this way toward the camera. So this is going to give me the best opportunity. The other thing I would say is when bucks come in to rattling, they usually don't come straight in. They will try to circle downwind on either side. So I always try to look at my shooting lane opportunities off to my sides. And a lot of the shots that I get are about 45 degrees off my main point of, or line of sight. So here we go, I'm gonna set up and we'll get started. All right, so now I'm kind of settled into a spot in a hunting situation. I may have put a bow hook in this maple right here to my left and hung my bow up, or I might lean it up. But essentially when you start rattling, you can have action at any time. So you need to be careful, you need to be ready. I usually have an arrow on the string and I'm ready to go. If you're a rifle hunter, you might have a little bit more opportunity to be looking out over a larger area, looking for a buck that's coming out at 100 yards or 80 yards into a clear cut, whatever it might be. But in my case, being a bow hunter, it's usually a close range situation, so I gotta be ready. What I typically do is my first sequence is usually pretty light, and this is what it would be typically like. So in any calling situation, you want to emulate a scenario. And so the scenario that I like to emulate is that I've got a doe that might be with her fawns. Again, this is October, mid-October, so I'm not going to be too aggressive. But younger bucks especially are going to be interested in does earlier than the older bucks. So I might come in here and put out a couple doe bleats. I might wait 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I do anything else. If I don't hear anything or see anything coming, then I might take my antlers, and I want to emulate the idea that two bucks did come in. And so I might take those antlers mid-October. It's going to be pretty light, not aggressive. You want to emulate two bucks that are kind of sorting out who's who. This doe is not ready to breed yet, and so these bucks aren't really that aggressive. But this sound, there's no other sound like that in the woods. So that's it. I might give it that much rattling, kind of lightweight, nothing too aggressive, and then I'm going to grab my bow and I'm going to be ready. And I'm going to be not rubbernecking like this. I'm going to be sitting motionless behind this fern, and I'm going to be scanning every opening, everything that I can see with my eyes. Minimal head movement, and if I am moving my head, I'm going to be moving very slowly. I'm going to wait 10-15 minutes. Nothing comes in. I don't hear a stick pop. It's dead quiet, whatever the case might be. Then I'm going to take my antlers and I'm going to up the game a little bit. I'm not going to get more aggressive, I'm simply going to go a little longer. So it might be something like this. Take a pause, listen, use the vegetation to your advantage. You want to be making natural sounds of animals pushing and shoving. Their hooves are hitting the ground, they're breaking a few sticks, they're moving through the ferns. Look at the environment you're hunting in and try to emulate the sounds that deer would be making if they were shoving each other in that environment. Come back on the horns again. And again, when you got a day like today where we've got a pretty good breeze going, they may not hear this far, but this sound, it's going to carry a long ways. And you don't need to be hitting them hard, aggressive. Again, this is going to be pretty lightweight, but that sound is going to pop and carry much further than the vegetation sounds. So then I'm going to do that a little bit, and at this point I'm done. I'm going to give this now 30 to 45 minutes of very focused searching for anything that is moving, any sounds. But I'm not going to get up and leave despite the urge to do so, because 9 times out of 10, when I say, well, heck, I've been here 20 minutes, nothing's coming in, I go to get up, grab my bow, and I turn around and there's a buck at 30 yards looking at me. So it's really important to give it time when you do these rattling setups. As we get later into October, you're going to want to increase the length of your rattling sessions and the aggressive nature of them. I will get completely sweaty in a rattling sequence. I've beat my knuckles bloody in a rattling sequence, trying to emulate 2 bucks in an all-out brawl. But I won't do this until late October, the last couple days, and then that 4-day late season in mid-November for the rifle season. I typically try to get a multi-season tag so that I can bow hunt during these seasons. I found that I have more action the last week of October and in that 4-day November late season than all of archery seasons combined. So for me, it's about upping the odds and getting the opportunities and making something happen. Rattling is one of the tools that I use, and it produces deer for me almost every year, along with doe bleats and fawn bleats, and setting up the way I've described here today. So give it a try. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you've had success rattling, I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, good luck this fall, and we'll do another follow-up video on kind of that late October and late season in November, because that's a different scenario. We're going to get really aggressive, and we're going to try to make something happen. So good luck out there.